My name is Eliad Wagner. I'm a synthesist, a composer, a performer. I love synthesizers. I'm also an educator. I spend a lot of time trying to kind of unpack all of the complex ideas that we just started, but it seems like already I feel like buzzing with ideas to people who are quite relatively naive, entering this world, trying to kind of clarify, okay, how do you make sense, at least in your initial steps of how to do this? So this is all very important for me. What I'm going to do today, I'm going to try to kind of make a little order of what's going to happen and the clutter in my head. So I'd like to give a short introduction to what I'm doing, and then I'll do a quick demonstration. I'll try after that to unpack some of the ideas that brought me to this space, like what I'm thinking of when I'm doing this, and then maybe another demonstration to kind of like wrap it up nicely and maybe also make a solid point. A point about the versatility and unpredictability of this instrument. I said who I was. I'm working with a modular synthesizer here, and the kind of thing I'm going to show you is an example of artistic research, or it's a part of a longer, ongoing artistic research on how to structure a performance and a musical piece in electronic music, particularly with this instrument and its quirky settings. I'm interested in algorithms less for their designs, but rather as means to arrive at a musical form, which is very, it's an important distinction for me. That's why I'm choosing to point it out. The kind of example that I have set up here is essentially using a simple old 1990s, early 1990s reverb box made by Alesis, the Alesis Nanoverb. It makes rooms. It makes small rooms, big halls, bathrooms, all kinds of stuff like that. But I'm using it to kind of create certain cybernetic objects in the most simple, old-fashioned sense of the word. So the idea of a system that takes, that looks at itself and tries to adjust, right? Self-regulation as a conduit to unpredictability in this whole kind of situation. So I'm going to try and demonstrate what it does. I don't do a simple feedback here. So the output of this device goes into the synthesizer, which is important to say. There is an audio feedback, but there is also some kind of analysis taking place. So the synthesizer, this particular synthesizer, it's more similar to an analog computer than a synthesizer. It can do simple synthesizery things like follow the amplitude of the sound or the envelope of the sound, and use that information to kind of derive control over the feedback, adjustments to the feedback. But there is also a bunch of processing and kind of like nonlinear processes in the audio chain that contribute to the timbres in there. I'll set up the clock first, because that's probably one of the most important things. Cool. All right. So the computer is here, by the way, only for this, to give you a bit of a visual component and the main points of what I do. So this is what we're doing. Small demo. Thank you. I would like to revisit this after I explain where I'm coming from, just to show how different things can be when I approach it or when I just begin in a different place. So this is about creating performance, right? I'm really into, well, I've always been fascinated with synthesizers. Working with synthesizer brought me to this space because the modular synthesizer specifically is an undefined instrument. There is no equivalent system necessarily to what I have here, maybe around the world. Not because it's so amazing, especially just because it's a self-curated thing. It is never complete. It's always missing something, or it's overwhelming. At some point you need to kind of like let go and go with what you have, and also seek constant definition to what it is. There is no canon, necessarily. Different people would give you different kind of opinions on what that is. There is no clear community that organizes around it, even though, you know, we all know Superbooth, but people are so different in their minds on what it is. You can't go to a conservatory or to a music school and learn how to play this. This is very much always a self-developed practice. I really like the fact that in this particular idea, that I'm using fixed hardware as means of kind of like establishing limitation on what I can do. I like the fact that I don't need to design the circuits, that I don't need to design the algorithm, but almost kind of like give in and work with what I have to find some kind of musical sense of it in the performance. When I started working with these instruments, it's very clearly dawned on me. I mean, also before the modular synthesizer, when they're just playing simple synthesizers, drum computers, bass liners. This is very powerful stuff. It doesn't necessarily need me to be here. And that's a sense I always got as a musician playing with this. So how do I justify my presence in this space in front of you doing this? What role should I assume to actually feel important to myself doing this, giving me musical value, but also for you as audiences, looking at me thinking, oh, this is interesting. It's interesting to watch. I see a person playing music. I connect to it musically. So that's a thing. Eventually, looking at like the different practices of playing and performing electronic music, a lot of people arrive at the idea of using surprise and response. You generate a sound, you generate a sequence of notes, you generate a rhythmical pattern. If it's interesting enough for you, if it's inspiring, to me, that needs surprise, then you respond to it in a meaningful way, and these chains of responses basically lead to musical form, or at least in my practice. So what you end up with is some kind of a clear moving away from having an idea about a musical piece, about a performance that you wish to carry out, a clear design, to approaching performance as an open question. I don't know what's going to happen. I understand it's not going to play a 4x4 rhythm necessarily, even though maybe some of you could understand some of the artifacts that I played before as a 4x4 rhythm. I come into the situation and I respond to it. Moving away from having a clear intention on what I want to do to paying attention to what this does and then adjusting myself. This is great. It gives me a purpose on stage. It makes me valuable to the situation. I feel like if I'm not doing anything, it's just going to be boring or god-awful loud. I need to respond very clearly. So these are kind of the things that kind of go through my mind. How much time do we have left? About the algorithm that kind of dominate this, I can show you later on, in a moment, some of the things that I'm using. So I create maps, essentially, of whatever is happening here, right? And these maps are used as instructions or scores, essentially. I often map to myself, what should I be doing in different iterations of performing these pieces? And there is a bunch of them at this point. This is a very simple example that I can unpack in about 15 minutes demonstration and 10 minutes Q&A. But there is more. It's extremely surprising situation, right? Just by using these ideas of self-regulation and feedback. And I really feel there is something meaningful, and I'm sure you all agree, and this was already discussed with Viola and Andrew, about the idea of technology being more than a tool to express an idea of mine, but rather some kind of a collaborator to arrive at an interesting observation. Maybe that's a good moment to show you some of the scores I'm using. If I could just find my cursor, here it is. So what I showed you right now is called Rooms, because it used this room simulator when I initially, a few years ago, started this. It was some kind of a gesture towards I'm sitting in a room where we use acoustic feedback. Should I wrap it up? 2 minutes, all right. Simple effects processor, but here you can tell, if you can see this is the audio feedback, right? What's happening, it's a very simple part. But the whole analysis of following the transients that it produces, sending them to an ASR, which is some kind of a fancy sample and hold, if you're savvy with synthesizer terms. I hope I don't offend anyone. Other processors, and then also using this information to control how this feedback loop is being processed, how it's being mapped into the stereo field. It's in the core of this piece, essentially. Every time I need to set it up, I need to look at this, set it up, and it creates a situation. I also mark for myself often, sometimes on paper. I have a notebook with a parallel. This is just actually for you. I usually use a pen. What should I be doing? What are kind of key points for doing this? A larger piece would maybe be, just a second. Here's even a larger thing that is very hard to unpack in under 35 minutes. It's called infinite coastlines. If you want to know more about it, I can talk later, because I really want to have one final point on interface, which is crucial. So the idea, I'm not using, I didn't even touch the synthesizer at this point. Occasionally, I regulated bass and volume, because we have two subs, and you want to take advantage, but you also don't want it to go out of control. But the idea that using a simple existing interface, knobs, sliders, buttons, toggle buttons like the ones down there, this feels extremely liberating to me. I feel that I'm working within a school of thought that I understand well. I feel like I'm limited by the physical attribute of the knob or the button, and it helps me make sense of a musical form, right? The fact that these knobs are all coincidentally, by someone else's design, very near to each other, it makes it so that playing this instrument, using this, is very similar to applying energy to a guitar string, for example. Simple gestures in different directions, in different intensities, can really make a substantial difference on the actual sound and the behavior of the system. I can be extremely sensitive to what I do, or I can be brutal and smack it, and it would be extremely different. So it behaves, the idea that I don't have to reach around or find a way to locate myself in this space is very, very important to the idea of making sense of this whole situation.